Good late Thursday, early Friday. Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center right now, giving a look at those temperatures across the region. Also, the radar on there, but you don't see much rain action right now across the region. Now, that's going to change. The temperatures here, well, some of these, we're going to start to see drop a little bit more as we look in subsequent nights here, as we're going to have just the pattern that's a little bit, cool even during the day with all that moisture around. So that'll be something to look forward to. But, it'll be more noticeable during the day, really, as we're tracking things here when we have some of those downpours more frequent out there. So high temperatures are a little bit lower here, as we're looking toward like Saturday, but then getting, later on in the forecast, quite a bit lower before they kind of try to go back up a little. But some areas won't even get to what I have if they get the rain action. If you, or I guess you could say unlucky and not get the rain here, then you're going to be in a situation where it'll be warming up a little bit more still, but you don't want too much rain. There is a small to, at least maybe even I could use the word noteworthy flash flood risk as we look ahead in the days ahead. You just got to be mindful because we could have some of that concern here taking place in some of our different zones. So just kind of stay tuned in that regard here. But we're not at this point, expecting anything like what we had here in terms of that flash flood risk with Debbie. Definitely not expecting any tropical cyclones in the Atlantic Basin for the next 7 days. But we're coming up on that 1-year anniversary of Hurricane Debbie making landfall here in our area. Getting overshadowed, rightfully so, unfortunately, by Helene there later on in the season. That was much worse for those Gulf Coast areas in general. The year before Idalia, but we're just going to take a quick look back here at the situation and a little bit. There's a real quick snippet of the coverage here from 1 year ago, coming up on the 5th of the August, which we're now in, since it is, past that midnight hour. So let's go ahead and take a quick look back at Debbie. So, again, that's the storyline there. Oh, I think we just had another power flash. Another power flash. So, again, just wanted to give you that. That's some more covered other power flashes that we were seeing out there. Unfortunately, it ended up being worse there with Helene not too long later on in the season. Again, we're not looking at anything in the tropics right now, thankfully. Eventually there could be something here as we get toward mid-August. We'll see, but nothing tropically. But it's going to be, a pattern where we have quite a bit of tropical moisture around, and there could be some flash flooding. Now, Debbie was a prolific flash flood situation. We even had, flash flood emergencies in place as we're looking at our local map. Hopefully, that's something that will, not even come close to this time around, but some areas will have some flash flooding that would look like here over the next week on and off, depending on where you're at. So it's going to be a August deluge, but not to the extent of Debbie here. We're not turning the logo red. We had it red for the heat there, just the excessive extreme heat warnings, and then a situation where we kept it red because of the tsunami situation in the Central and Eastern Pacific, but that's not the situation anymore. The tsunami warning advisory is all gone now from that 8.8 earthquake, which was, very significant up near Russia there in toward that part of the world. Now, some folks wonder, can we have tsunamis around our area? Well, it's not something you should stay up late at night worrying about, but unlike hurricanes, tornadoes, still trying not to do that, but, those are, real threats here that we have around our area, over the months, years, and the like, but, and wildfires too, for that matter, lightning, you get the idea, but tsunamis are really, really low in threat around here, and the idea is, with that, is that they're pretty unlikely to happen, with the distant earthquake, especially triggering them, because we don't really have many in the Atlantic Basin, zones that would be favorable for that. But we just have to be kind of mindful because there is a chance, at least a little bit of a chance here that we could have an issue with a volcano that's closer toward areas, around Africa there. And if something kind of fell apart with that, it could trigger, something. It's a real off chance, but we'll have to, just, always be, things happen quick with that. So if we did have something, a big earthquake down there near Haiti, if it was bigger than even what they normally have had over the years, that could be a trigger point. We also have had, like in 1992, a situation down toward Daytona Beach where they didn't have any type of warning, to it, but because of apparently a distant squall line there, July 3rd, 1992, a 10-foot wave came across Daytona Beach and injured folks, kind of out of the blue late at night there. So, that was kind of a different kind of tsunami, but still very impactful, and, depending on what time of day, if that had hit during the day, that could be deadly, and there might not be much warning for something that's, more localized like that. There is also a chance, albeit, very remote, I hate even talking about it in, this round, but I just, looking at it, reading about it, if we did have something, like some type of just something really hitting the Atlantic Ocean there, or the Gulf for that matter. And we're talking about a situation here where, maybe the asteroid strikes. I know it's something that is not, something that we ever want to talk about. We'd probably have bigger problems if we had that happen, but that can also trigger something. So there are, albeit, remote, you know, scenarios where it happens, you do have to just be aware that tsunamis are not out of the question here toward the Gulf, the Atlantic. Not really, seeing much of that 1992 example, in the history books here toward the region, but that 192 didn't have any warning really. It just kind of came up on people, which, is very scary. And something like that, that could happen again. It's not impossible for sure. Still might not be able to get a warning because there wouldn't be enough gauge data, I wouldn't think, to be able to let people know in time. So, that's the one situation where if you had a warning, you probably can get out all right. I know. But that scenario in 1992 is just a month or so before Andrew. So once Andrew happened, people kind of stopped talking about that, I would think, based on what I read. I wasn't around back then. But my point is, just reading about that, that is something. It can happen, but very remote chances of it compared to other hazards because we don't really generally have, much earthquake history anywhere close. I mean, some up in South Carolina, but that was on land areas there. This would have to be something in the water. Would have to be very significant. If it's an earthquake is what I'm kind of talking about there. It'd have to be more significant than what we generally would see in the history books, and it would have to be, maybe not as deep too. The one up toward Russia might have been a little deep there to trigger more than what we had, like a 5-foot tsunami toward parts of Hawaii, which is still dangerous, but nothing like what you had out toward Indonesia and Japan, which were just absolutely catastrophic. Some of the worst, natural disasters in the history of the world in 2004 and 2011 was just thousands and thousands of fatalities. But again, I know there's just different examples there with tsunamis. It's always good to remain alert here in these scenarios. Assuming that they ever could happen. Now, again, earthquakes, those triggers have to be something really strong, as I talked about, but then there's the other remote possibilities of a volcano fails. Talking about one closer toward areas there in the Atlantic off of Africa, and then also the other possibility there is an asteroid, which probably again might have bigger problems if that happened. Again, remote possibilities. Let's go ahead and move on though. I know people have been kind of wondering about that. It can't happen. Unlikely, but non-zero chance. Okay, to the graphics we go about storm names. Again, we've talked about how, last year this time we were getting, ready here for Debbie potentially moving toward our area. This time from give or take, it hit on the 5th. I know it, kind of was a pretty quick developer. I mean, that Friday night, I think we were on leading into it, ended up being on Monday. So, always got to pay attention during the weekend. It wasn't like Hurricane Andrew in 92 where, it all evolved over the weekend on everybody. Brian Norcross gave that heads up to everybody in South Florida from Andrew in 92 because he was, so worried that things could happen while people, were not paying attention as much over the weekend, could catch them off guard. And he was right, absolutely, with that threat coming on in, so catastrophic for them. Again, Debbie, nothing like that around here in 2024, 2012, but both were impactful for sure. And we do have additional hurricane supplies that are now tax-free here in Florida. So that's good to note, like batteries now. Something that's going to be apparently, permanent is what it's been described as of now. Which, that would be some great news for everybody. But You see Dexter, Aaron, the next two names on the list here. The next two names on the list. So we'll be paying attention again. Tropics are quiet right now, which is great news, but that can always change. Things pretty quick. Some stuff out in the Atlantic we might have to watch closer to mid-month, but we shall see. Just enjoy the time right now. We're not paying attention to the tropical system, but we will have tropical moisture around. You see, here now we're in August, and later in August into early October is when the chances really go up for development and for hurricanes and for impactful systems. Now you see rainfall forecast next 7 days. There's going to be a lot of rain that's anticipated to work, especially our South Georgia and Tallahassee areas here. You see around maybe Brunswick area, we could, we have some concerns here, some flash flooding according to this. We'll see. It may not set up exactly there, but my point is, just be mindful. I know around historic Gainesville sound a little less on here, but that Brunswick area, that's showing on this map here like 5 inches possible in a widespread manner over the next 7 days. Camden, Glenn counties there, St. Mary's, Georgia, and the like. So, again, just trying to give you guys the very latest here on all that. You can go to clutter.com/radar for an active look at things if you don't need to be on. Could have some aerial flood warnings. That's, different than a flash flood warning, of course. Flash flood means more rapid type of water rise. So, as if they're considerable, they go off on your phone. But even just the base one will be letting you know about it. Whether it's just by posting it on the different platforms or actually coming on, depending on the severity of things. So, there's a different platforms if you're wondering, of course. We're just going to keep watching everything here, meteorologically. As you see that drought index here and monitor per se, things look better, toward northern Florida. Not much of a drought, so been really dry, and, this rain coming may get rid of more of that. You still have some concerns like in South Florida, though, especially with a severe to extreme drought, Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach counties there with some severe droughts. So, coverage area, again, we're always keeping an eye on things here. Facebook, again, one of the platforms we're on. Casey Cloud Reacts and Cloud Weather. Twitter/X at Cloud Casey. YouTube at Cloud Weather. Twitch Cloud Weather, and Clutter.com. Trying to keep you informed on all the different platforms. So it's very important to just, be watching here. When conditions warrant, we're on, we're in Bradford County. We're watching things for the 62 counties. So just make sure you kind of stay in tuned here for the very latest. So let me go ahead and continue along here and see that extended forecast. You see a 30% chance of rain on this Friday. So last day, it's going to be hot. So you still got to be using, those heat safety tips, practicing those, to stay cool. Expecting a rocket to go up late this morning with some people on it, astronauts here, or Cape Canaveral. Hopefully, like yesterday, it does go up and everything's all right. And something that maybe we'll get to see from our area here. So that's late morning. But you see on that Saturday, we're going to have more cloud cover, more storms. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, more storms, in the forecast. 70% the highest strength chance. That's on Sunday. But you see the temperature do dip upper 80s even for the highs, what I have on Sunday, Monday. But some spots might not even get that high if we get, socked in with moisture, especially like around Brunswick or something. We cross somewhere like that. Some examples, listed there. Locations that could be impacted by heavier downpours and so even flooding. You see 74, 74 for those lows. Start to dip a little more later on in the period as well. So that's something to keep in mind here. For sure, as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things, I know definitely going to be, pretty wet around. So we'll be keeping tabs on that and giving the latest updates. And, something we do want cool weather, cooler temperatures. But in return, we're getting wetter conditions. So we'll be with you here, with those updates again as warranted. Giving you guys the very latest on exactly what is happening, obviously, across the area. And then, we'll have that formal update here late Tuesday, giving you guys the latest information, late Tuesday, early Wednesday, giving you the latest here on the weather scenario. So just make sure you tune in there for that. But we'll be on also for updates here if and as warranted with the flooding concerns. So just keep it tuned to Cloud Weather. We'll be keeping you guys advised here again, as warranted. So, again, definitely watching things here, definitely tracking them, trying to just keep you guys informed here on all the different platforms, obviously. Again, though, even though we could have some flooding, we're in a situation, and sometimes in August we'll have flooding, even if we don't have tropical systems. Even before we had all those toward the Gulf Coast, we've had, flooding toward, like Cedar Key and that region before, or at least, maybe Dixie County area. So bad going back before the tropical, accident that picked up here so much the last couple of years. So this is a month that can definitely, start to show some, more enhanced moisture around, and stuff that's not moving too fast here causes it to kind of train and sit. So have to be mindful of that, even without tropical cyclone action going. Tropical moisture, definitely something to be looking out for. But again, we are thankful, we didn't have, here this first week of August, at least, down the road, you never know. Obviously, by the way, you see a little bit of storm action, shower storm action there, just north of Cape Canaveral right now at 2:30 in the morning on this August 1st. But, at least this first week of the month, we're not going to have a tropical cyclone. It doesn't look like around. After that, though, you never know. Models, some of them are showing something. They're all over the place right now. Have to watch, but not enough confidence still. We talked about this earlier on, like last week. Something's, here and there's been stopping the models, but there's not enough confidence to, turn the logo red for that. I had a red for the heat and a tsunami, situation. They did have a tsunami out in the Central Eastern Pacific, but it was, 3 feet, 5 feet, stuff along those lines in some of the worst spots. That's nothing like, 90 feet, which just, absolutely is unfathomable, like what they saw, toward areas, give or take, with that number. Japan, Indonesia, some areas even worse than that, 2004, 2011, so it's awful. But, luckily here, no tropical cyclone for next week around. Different story with Debbie last year. Again, other than look back at that coverage here from 1 year ago. I mean, we had those power flashes live. That Florida 511 camera told the story. So, again, that's the storyline there. Oh, I think we just had another power flash. Another power flash. So, again, so many of that. I mean, that storm gets overlooked because we had something quite a bit worse there, obviously, in the form of Helene not far after. But still, that was impactful. I mean, if you look back over the last 25 years, I mean, both Debbies would make a, top, tennis. I haven't done it recently, looked through them all, but both of those probably about top 10 storms for our area. Some maybe even 2012 might even be higher than last year's hurricane. That was a tropical storm, but it had even more rain with it. But both of them very impactful for our area. So, but not retired. Debbie's name was back in 2030. Those are both very impactful around here. Nothing like, Irma or Helene or Idalia level type of damage and destruction. But still, big deals, obviously, as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. So, again, some storms more about rain, some more about wind. Another storm, I mean, used to always get tied about, doesn't really much anymore, but Faye back in 2008 was a big rainmaker, toward our area for sure. And that was a big deal for a few years there. I mean, quite honestly, as we were looking at things and as we were tracking things here in the meteorology picture, it was something. We didn't have any storms around that time, and there wasn't a hurricane. Didn't have any hurricanes hit Florida from after Wilma in 05 or in 2016, believe it or not. I know that's crazy, but, I always have to take that down when I say it, but I'm pretty sure that's it. We didn't have any hurricanes directly make landfall, at least in the state, after Wilma in 05, and, South Florida to Helene in 26, or Hermine in 2016 there toward Tallahassee. So, yeah, crazy how many times we had Hermine, Helene. It's not been fun lately. Hopefully we get a respite here for a while. But you can see it is a tornado threat in the country on this Friday up toward parts of Colorado, Nebraska, South Dakota. You kind of get the idea there. Just, a little bit of Kansas even mixed in there for sure. Severe threat. There is a organized threat to our north. I mean, we'll watch for that. There was some flooding up toward mid-Atlantic, northeast on that Thursday, but you see some marginal risk, type severe action possible up toward areas around Atlanta, Charlotte, and Columbia, South Carolina, Myrtle Beach. there is that, small risk of some wind damage in organized fashion. The last 12 hours with that rainfall there, those rainfall amounts, as we look at things, as we track things here, as we're trying to give you the latest on everything, you do see, several inches in some of these spots, 4 inches, orange areas, 3 inches, give or take, in the red spots in the last 12 hours. So it's going back to about 2:30 on that Thursday afternoon. Some spots definitely had some flooding there, as you see in parts of like New Jersey and the like there. Some of these areas being impacted. As you kind of zoom in, some areas about half foot there. As you're looking at things, as you're tracking things of the geography. So definitely noteworthy for sure. And as the situation does evolve there, we'll zoom back in just one more time. Definitely a lot of that precip there impacting folks in some areas of that portion of the country. So then that's going to wrap it for now. Do you see a little lightning down there north of Cape Canaveral? Hope they get it out of the way, before that launch with the astronauts later this morning. But we shall see. So everybody, always trying to play it safe with that. Even if there's not lightning around, sometimes if there's a rocket and then there's some storms that aren't storms yet, but they're close, to having that lightning production. Rocket launch actually, believe it or not, can kind of act as a trigger, and then you can have astronauts on board, and that would not be a good combination. So if you actually have the convection already getting going, it can kind of push, one of those strikes. It can cause it to get going, and could even be cloud to ground, which would be, not a good situation. But again, that's going to do it for now. I hope you have a great night. Have a great weekend, but stay dry. It's been about staying warm now. It's about staying, dry here. Whenever thunder roars, go indoors, obviously. We'll be keeping you guys advised here. We're going to be keeping you guys informed here as, things evolve with the weather picture. Have a great night.